Well, welcome everybody. I'm so glad you have joined us today as we continue our series called Faith in Hard Times, how to have strong faith in the midst of tough times. If we haven't met before, my name is Johnny, and I serve as the pastor at Hutto Discovery United Methodist Church, and thrilled to be joining you here in this sort of virtual atmosphere. And if you're joining us for the very first time, if you stumbled upon this video or if a friend has shared it with you, I am so glad you're here. Thank you for being here. I want you to know that this series, we just got started in it last week, and so if you missed last week, we keep all of our sermons and whatnot archived. We would love for you to check it out wherever you're watching this, whether it's on Facebook or YouTube. We have them archived there. We're doing a series called Faith in Hard Times, and we do a series like this because I think that we all know, I think it's just something all of us know, that whether or not we've been through them before, our life will at some point experience some sort of hardship, some sort of hurt, maybe even call it suffering. And I'm not talking about hurt feelings, something that lasts a day or a couple hours or maybe even just a couple days, but I'm talking about that deep kind of pain that feels like it's never going to go away. That sort of hard time, that sort of hurt that can just seem to linger and linger. We all know that one day we're likely going to experience a season like that. And I also know that right at this very moment, there are, generally speaking, three categories of people that are watching this video, that are tuning in during this series. For some of you, this is your reality right now. You are in what we might call a hard time. This series could not have come at a more perfect time for you. And if that is you, I am so glad you're here, and I pray that in spite of me or because of me, that the Spirit speak through me and bless you today. For others of you, you may not be going through a hard time right now, but you have a friend or a family member who is. And maybe you are walking with them during that time. You're trying to be there for them and be a source of comfort and hope and support and encouragement. And you find yourself lacking in words to say to bring any sort of comfort or strength in that time. I hope that you find those words here. I hope that you are empowered as you are here, and maybe even feel the Spirit's nudge to invite that friend or that family member to participate with us as we go through this series together. And then still there are others of you, the third category, that you don't fit into either one of those previous two categories. You're not in what we would call a hard time. You've never been in one. Life for you is actually pretty good right now, all things considered. And if that's you, then I want you to do your future self and your future friends and family a favor, and think of this and tune in. Don't check out at this time, because even if you don't need this right now, if you don't need this today, you're going to need it someday. And so I pray that you're locked in, you're tuned in, you're committed to this series, taking notes, so that you can do your future self a favor. And the invitation for us all during this series is to lean into what God is speaking to us, whether it's for our present self or for our future self. Now, last week, we began by talking about the nature of faith in hard times, and that depending on how you understand your faith, hard times and the hard questions that arise during those hard times can either be a problem for your faith, can stall your faith, can sometimes crumble your faith, or those hard questions that arise during hard times can be potential for your faith to grow. So when we think of our faith as simply the equivalent of belief, what we need are hard answers to our hard questions. And oftentimes when we think of faith like that, of being certain of the things that we believe, then the hard times can really wreak havoc on our faith. I suggest that faith is less like certainty of belief, but faith is more like trust. It's more like in the face of the unknown, in the face of fear, we learn to lean on something stronger than ourselves, outside of ourselves, that can hold us up when we feel like we can't hold ourselves up. And when we think of faith like trust, then we know that faith grows like a muscle. Faith is like a muscle. right? It's kind of like love in that aspect as well. That muscles, like your actual muscles, will grow not when they're at rest, not when they're not being utilized, but muscles grow when they are stretched and stressed beyond their current capacity. And sure, when that happens, they might get sore. You might be sore for a few days. It might hurt a little bit. But at the end of it, they have grown in their capacity to bear bigger and bigger burdens. Faith is the exact same way. So in the face of the hard questions that we face in our hard times, our faith has the potential to grow. Now, to go through this series, we chose the book of Habakkuk. It's in the Old Testament because I'm sure many of you have never heard of this book before, and I promise you I'm not making it up. It's actually in there. Go grab your Bible, turn it to the table of contents. You'll find it there. It's near the back of the Old Testament. You'll find it there. Three very short chapters, which makes this book perfect for us to explore this topic. But even more so, the prophet Habakkuk, in his time that he lived, the whole purpose of his writing was wrestling with his faith in the midst of a hard time in which he lived. I did the history for this last week, so I'm going to do a little bit more of an abbreviated version. If you want the longer version of it, check out the video from last week. But quickly, Habakkuk lived in the 7th century BCE in the southern kingdom of Judah. The Hebrew people, Israel, split into two kingdoms, the northern kingdom, Israel, southern kingdom, Judah. That's where Habakkuk lived. In the century previous to his life, the northern kingdom of Israel had been taken over by the Assyrians. He'd seen it happen, and it was devastating. And he knows that they're likely next. On top of the outside threats to the sovereignty of their nation, there was internal struggles as well, as all the rulers of these nations had grown corrupt. And they were only self-serving and serving of the highest classes of people, and there were people who were suffering at the hands of their own government. And so not only is there strife and there's hurt and there's harm within, there is fear of danger without, right? And Habakkuk's fear would soon be realized a century, not even a century, but just into the next century after his life, when the Babylonians come in and take over the southern kingdom of Judah. So in short, Habakkuk lives every day looking around at a nation that was supposed to be God's holy and chosen people, a people that would display God's glory throughout the land, that would speak of God's goodness and teach people to live in God's world. And yet, the nation had split into two. Their governments were corrupt. The northern kingdom had already been conquered and captured. And Habakkuk knew that the southern kingdom was next. And what's worse is that Habakkuk knew that he and his people were powerless to stop it. And when we looked at last week was Habakkuk's cry out to God, "How long, O Lord? I have prayed," and the people are praying that you would save us from this suffering. How long will we cry out to you and you not answer us? And we know that's a prayer that anybody who's been through a hard time or is going through a hard time now, you have prayed that prayer. You feel like you're asking and reaching out, and it feels like there's no answer on the horizon. And the gist of what Habakkuk is complaining to God about is this: God, things are bad. Like, look around. I know you know. Things are bad right now. And I am worried. We, as a people, are worried that things are going to get worse. So what we're going to look at today is God's response to Habakkuk's complaint, and then how Habakkuk reacts to God's response. It's sort of a dialogue that ensues between the two of them. And what I think you'll hear, what I hope you'll hear in this part of Habakkuk's writing, is one of the most difficult questions that we face in the midst of hard times, that all believers do, including us today. So let's take a quick look at Habakkuk chapter 1 as the Lord answers Habakkuk after he says, "How long, God, will we call for help and you won't listen?" God says, "Look at the nations and watch and be utterly amazed, for I am going to do something in your days that you would not believe even if you were told. I am raising up the Babylonians, that ruthless and impetuous people who sweep across the whole earth to seize dwellings not their own. They are a feared and dreaded people. They are a law unto themselves and promote their own honor. Their horses are swifter than leopards, fiercer than wolves at dusk. Their cavalry gallops headlong. Their horsemen come from afar. They fly like an evil, swooping to devour. And they all come intent on violence. Their hordes advance like a desert wind and gather prisoners like sand. They mock kings and scoff at rulers. They laugh at all fortified cities. By building earthen ramps, they capture them. Then they sweep past like the wind and go on. Guilty people whose own strength is their God. God's response is, essentially Habakkuk has asked, God, things are getting bad. We're afraid they're going to get worse. And God says, you're right. It's about to get a whole lot worse, in fact. Because these people who just seem to run over everybody they come into contact with, they're on their way. And you won't be able to stop them. This is how Habakkuk replies to God, because as you could imagine, Habakkuk probably not that satisfied with that answer. Habakkuk says in response to God, Lord, are you not from everlasting? My God, my Holy One, you will never die. You, Lord, have appointed them to execute judgment. You, my rock, have ordained them to punish. Your eyes, God, are too pure to look on evil. You cannot tolerate wrongdoing. Why then do you tolerate this treacherousness? Why are you silent while the wicked swallow up those more righteous than themselves? Essentially, God, I hear you, but aren't you good? Aren't you almighty? Why would you tolerate such a treacherous people and allow them to just run rampant on the earth and devour people more righteous than themselves? How could you allow that? Essentially, the question that Habakkuk is asking is the question that plagues many of us in the midst of hard times. Or maybe if we're not in a hard time and we're looking at hard times in the world, the question is this: if God is good, God, if you are good, then why, God, do you allow bad things to happen? And if you're in the midst of that hard time, if you've experienced profound loss in your life, if you've been trying to dig yourself out of a hole and nothing seems to work, this is a question that comes out of the depths of our soul and has real implications for how we walk through our hard times and whether or not we do it seemingly alone. Because often we think, God, I know I'm not perfect. I've been pretty good. Why is this happening to me? Or why is this happening to my friend? If you've asked this question or are asking this question, how would you answer it? How do you answer that? Do you even have one? Sometimes we have an answer until we go through the hard time, and then we don't have an answer for it at all. Or the answer we thought we had isn't good enough anymore. Or, let's say your best friend calls you tonight with news that you never expected to hear and that they never expected to share. And they ask why. Do we have an answer? Well, remember when we talked last week about hard questions, and if our faith is equivalent to certainty of belief, then we have to have a hard answer to that hard question. And if our faith is more like trust in the midst of uncertainty, we don't need a hard answer. We don't need absolute certainty, but we do need direction. We need something to help us know who and how to trust. So as a pastor, I've had many of these conversations with people that are going through hard times and asking this question, why? And so I want to share with you some of the ways in which I respond to folks with this question. I'm going to start by giving you somewhat of a framework of how to think about this, sort of a theological framework, especially for those that aren't going through your current hard time. This might be really helpful to begin thinking critically about the problem of suffering in the world. It's a tad abstract, so I'm going to ask you to hang with me as I go through it, but we'll go through it quickly. And then I'm going to get real practical with some things, especially for those that are going through their hard time right now, ways to respond to those questions rising up in you, especially that question of why. So let me start with this. I believe that God gives us three very significant gifts. And those are three gifts, and these three gifts are this. The first one is life. The second one is love. And the third one is choice. So the first gift, life, the very breath in our lungs, the fact that we are conscious and aware and breathing, like life itself is a gift. We look at the very beginning of Genesis. God created out of his gracious creativity and decided to just pour out life upon the earth. Anybody who is alive now did not make themselves alive. You were gifted life. Life, in fact, is a gift of God. The second is love. And I believe that's because God is love, right? The ability for us to think outside of ourselves on behalf of others, for the benefit of others, and to be able to receive that same grace from others and from God, that is an absolute gift. And then lastly, choice. We have been given free will, the ability to choose to love or not love, to choose life or to choose death. Choice, at the heart of every single choice that we make, is how we respond to the two gifts that God has given us. So in other words, you woke up today with the choice of how you were going to spend this day. Like, you could get up and get yourself ready and sit here and go to church with yourself or with your family. Or you could have chosen to just stay in bed all day and not do anything today. You have a choice on what you do with the gift of life, how you're going to respond to the life that has been given to you. In the same way, God has given you the gift of love, and you get to decide what you want to do with that love that God gives you, with the love that others give you. For example, if you have children, you give love to your kids. And you do that in many different ways, and they have a choice in how they respond to that love. My wife, Holly, gives love to me, and I have a choice in how I respond to that love. I can accept it and then reciprocate it, or I can accept it, keep it for myself, and not reciprocate it, right? Like, we have choices on how we respond to those two previous gifts that are given to us. We get to choose. And one of the outcomes of our freedom to choose is that there are things that happen every single day in our world, in our lives, in our homes maybe, that are not as God intended them to be. Another way to say that is that we live in a broken world. We live in a broken world. I can say that very simple phrase, and I don't think that's news to anybody. I don't think anybody would argue with me about the truth of that statement. We live in a broken world. And in a broken world, there are things that happen every single day that are not what God imagined or intended for his creation. And sometimes all of that brokenness starts with a choice. It starts with a choice that we make that causes harm to us or causes harm to someone that we love. Or a choice that someone else makes out of selfishness or fear that harms us. We live in a broken world, and it's more than just individual actions, the choice that I make or that you make or somebody else that we come into contact makes that could either help or harm us. There's this individual sin and brokenness that exists, but there's also this collective sort of global brokenness, this corporate brokenness and sin that we experience that is sort of universal to the human condition. Now, to say that we live in a broken world and that brokenness arises out of the misuse of the gift of choice that God has given us is to say this very important thing, that I do not believe that the hurt and the hard times we experience come from God. I'm going to say it again because I think some of you need to hear it again. When I talk about this gift of choice that we've been giving and some of the brokenness, a lot of the brokenness that happens in the world, arises out of the misuse of that gift of choice, is also to say that the brokenness that we experience does not come at the hands of God. The illness that you or your loved one contracted, that's not God's doing. The loss of a family member or a friend or a child or a mother or a father, God did not do that. Bad things happen in this world. Hurt happens. We experience brokenness, but this is not God's doing. But you might say, Pastor, I've read Habakkuk. You asked me to read it, and I saw in there something that would lead me to believe that God did this. In fact, if you look at verse 6 right here, it says, I'm raising up the Babylonians, that ruthless and impetuous people who sweep across the whole earth to seize dwellings not their own. That sounds like God is doing that. Well, let me say that there are two ways of thinking about that. So the first, you could see that as God's punishment, right? Like God's upset. He's fed up with the behavior of his people, and so he cooks up a concoction called the Babylonians, and he's just going to pour it out on them and see if that teaches them a lesson once and for all. That's one way to look at it. That's God kind of as a puppeteer. God gets angry and causes the bad things to happen in our lives so that we can learn from them, so that we are punished by them. It's like being grounded by God, right? That's one way to think about it. The other way to interpret it, which is the way that I interpret it, is that this is an understanding that Habakkuk has as he writes down God's words, right? It's an understanding that Habakkuk has that there are natural consequences for our broken choices. That part of the freedom to choose is also the freedom to bear the responsibility of those choices. In essence, to be able to reap the blessings of our good choices, but also to bear the burden of consequence of our bad choices. And what Habakkuk might see as he interprets God's words is that these two kingdoms lived in unfaithfulness. Not only did they split apart from one another and in a very practical, pragmatic way weaken themselves militarily, but also more than that, they stepped away from God's will and God's law that was to guide and direct and protect them. That was to make them strong. And as they weakened themselves, not only as nations, but also they crippled themselves from the inside out by corrupt leadership, made them absolutely susceptible to outside influences, right? As they come in and they take over, they were not equipped to protect themselves. So not only on a practical, political level, but also on a spiritual level, they left themselves wide open and vulnerable because of their unfaithfulness. But Habakkuk might say, as God is saying this to him, like, look, there are consequences for the way in which you live as a nation. My people were called to be this way, and you weren't this way, and this is what happens. I don't like it, but this is what happens, right? Habakkuk might say, well, don't you know, God, that like as a result of this, if you don't step in, people like me who had nothing to do with that unfaithfulness, or there's families, there's children, there are parents out there that had nothing to do with this unfaithfulness that are going to suffer as a result of these poor choices that other people have made. And I believe God's answer to Habakkuk would be, I know. That's why it breaks my heart so much. But I've given you a great gift. When you use that gift wisely, when people use that gift wisely and faithfully, amazing, miraculous things happen. But I also know that it comes with the possibility of people of misusing that gift that I've given them. And this is why I've called you to faithfulness, Habakkuk. We live in a broken world. But you also might ask the question, well, okay, Pastor, that makes a whole lot of sense to me, I think. But what about those things that we experience, the suffering that happens, the pain and the hurt and the brokenness that we feel in those seasons of life that we go through that aren't the result of anybody's decision? There's no real logic or natural reason for the bad things that are taking place in my life or in the life of those that I love. Like, what do we do about that? For that, I want us to look together at Habakkuk chapter 2. At the beginning of that chapter is the end of Habakkuk's second complaint, as he's been saying to God, like, but what about? What about? I know you said, God, but what about? Aren't you everlasting to everlasting? I don't like the answer you gave me, right? I complained, you answered, I don't like that answer. But then Habakkuk says here at the beginning of chapter 2, but I will stand at my watch and station myself on the ramparts. I will look to see what God will say to me and will answer, and what answer I am to give to this complaint. In fact, I don't like your answer, God. I don't like the way, but I will stand and wait for you. I will be faithful to you. And this is the Lord's reply. Write down the revelation and make it plain on tablets so that a herald may run with it. For the revelation awaits an appointed time. It speaks of the end and will not prove false. Though it may linger, wait for it. It will certainly come and it will not delay. Verse 4, see, the enemy is puffed up. His desires are not upright, but the righteous person will live by his faithfulness. And that's the key right there, I think. The righteous person will live by their faithfulness. Or some translations say by faith. The righteous person will live by faith, meaning trust. They will live by their trust in me. In other words, the righteous person does not live in reaction to their circumstances, but by faith. So I know we've already talked about faith as trust, but let's look at faith in another way. What does it mean to live by faith? Hebrews chapter 11, this is in the New Testament near the back, close to Revelation. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1 says this way, that faith is confidence in what we hope for. It's the confidence in what we hope for, and assurance about what we do not see. Scripture like that gives me great comfort in times of trouble, because there are things that I see as a pastor. There are conversations I have with people. There are things that I experience that I just don't understand. I don't. There might be some answer out there somewhere. There might be some way that I would know, or some understanding or wisdom that I would gain in the future from it. There are things that I experience and I confront that I just don't understand. I wish I did, but I don't. But when we lack understanding, we as a people live by faith and trust. And I'm reminded that faith is about confidence in the things that I hope for, that God is good and that all things are working together for good. And even if it's not good now, and even if I don't ever see the good that comes of it, that good is happening, that God is good and God is working good in the world. I live by that confidence in what I hope for, and the assurance that of the things that aren't seen, that if there's good working, even though I don't see it yet, that it is there, and it will happen. But the reality is that faithful people, me and you, faithful people, we're never promised a problem-free, pain-free, trouble-free life. Being a person of faith doesn't protect you from the brokenness of the world. Being a follower of Jesus does not protect you from suffering and brokenness. In fact, more often than not, it thrusts you into that brokenness and suffering. Look at the life of Jesus himself. The most righteous of all of us was thrust into suffering and brokenness on our behalf. The late and great Dallas Willard says it this way, that is just so profound for us. And sometimes not at all what we want to hear, but it is what we need to hear. It says, Jesus didn't die on the cross so that you don't have to. Jesus, died on the cross so that you could join him there. Or so that if you find yourself there, you know that you're not alone. Our Savior, the one that we put our trust in, knows your suffering, will sit with you in it, and will walk with you out of it. John 16, verse 33, these are Jesus' own words, I think, that are just so helpful for us in the times of our absolute hurt. And if you're in the midst of your hard time, I want you to find John, the Gospel of John, chapter 16, verse 33, highlight it, underline it, write it down in your journal, pray it every single day. Jesus says this, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. Because in this world you will have trouble, but take heart, for I have overcome the world. Jesus says, in me you may have peace. Not in you, not in your circumstances, not in your health, not in your wealth, not in all of your plans working out the way that you had visioned them happening, but in Jesus, in me, you will have peace. Because you will have trouble in this world. But take heart. Meaning, don't give up. Don't give up, for I have overcome the world. The worst thing you experience in your life is never the last thing. So if you're watching this today, if you've joined us, and you're in the midst of your hard time right now, and you know, if you're really honest with yourself and you were to confess that it's a result of some poor decisions you made. It might have some other people involved too, but you know, where you are now is a result of a life that had some decisions that you wish you could do over again, even if you had the best of intentions back then. But like it just you're reaping the consequences. You're bearing the burden of the consequences of choices that you made in the past. What I want you to hear is that regardless of what those decisions were, those choices were, and regardless of whatever it is you're walking through now, no matter how hard it is, you need to remember grace. God loves you no matter what. Romans chapter 8 says that there's nothing in this world that can separate you from the love of God in Jesus Christ. And so as God has extended that grace to you, you need to extend grace to yourself. It's hard. It might be a long road to recovery for you, whatever that recovery looks like and whatever it is that you're recovering from. It might be a long road to recovery, but your story is not over. It's not forfeit. It's not ruined. Because God has redeemed you. God has claimed you. And transformation and resurrection is kind of the business God is in. So remember grace. And if you're watching this and the hard times that you are in are the result of someone else's poor choices, someone else misusing the gift, the freedom of choice that they have, or as a result of nothing at all, you have no idea how you got here, why you're here, why this is happening to you or to someone you love. If that's you, I want you to remember trust. Remember Jesus' words. In him you would have peace. And that though you have trouble now, take heart. Because Jesus has overcome the world. Jesus has overcome that trouble. Lean on him, even if you can't see the way out, if you don't understand how this all gets better or if it gets better. Lean on God. Because goodness is coming. Let's pray together. Holy God, I just thank you so much for everyone who has joined us in this time as we seek your wisdom and your word. I pray your blessing over each and every one of us, God, that the wisdom that you have for us, God, might seek deep into our hearts, God, might be planted deep within us so that it might take root and bear good fruit in our lives. God, I pray that we might remember your grace, that no matter what it is that we have done and what we are doing now, God, that our lives are never over or irredeemable, God, because you have redeemed us. You have claimed us. We are yours. Your love knows no end and no bounds. So as you have extended that grace, God, let us accept it. Let it wash over us, God, and purify our hearts, make us clean, and stand up tall in the light of your love. And God, I just pray for each and every one of us as we go through times of uncertainty, brokenness, that you plant in us a seed of faith to trust you and to live into your peace, that peace that surpasses all understanding, that we might walk with you, that we might let you carry us, God, when we feel like we can't walk anymore, that you might restore joy in our lives in spite of our circumstances, and give us strength and courage to face a new day. We pray all these things in the powerful and wonderful name of Jesus, who showed us, God, who you are and taught us how to be in relationship with you and also taught us how to pray. And we pray together as faithful people now, God, the words that he taught us by saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. I'm so grateful that you have joined us this day for this time of teaching as we continued our series, Faith in Hard Times. I have a few quick announcements for you before you go. The first is this: if you haven't heard, September 6th, the first Sunday in September, we're going to be having our first gathering on the church grounds since March, and we're very excited about that. I know so many of you have been doing your best to join us online. This digital format has just not been helpful for you, and so as a church, we want to do our best to care for you in that time. So we're going to have a time of teaching and communion and prayer out in the church yard. You can bring your lawn chair if you want. There's lots of details on that. I know many of you have already heard this before. If you have not heard this yet and you want more details about it, go to our website, huddlediscovery.org/gathering. And just a reminder for those of you that won't be able to make that or are trying to stay home and limit your public appearances at this time, for whatever reason that is, I don't want you to fear. You're not going to miss anything. I mean, obviously, you're going to miss everybody. We're going to miss you. But content-wise, we are still going to have the time of teaching here and a time of communion on Facebook and on YouTube. There's nothing that you're going to miss out on for not being here. So whether you're here on September 6th at 9:30 or you're joining us online, we are going to be blessed to be with you in that. A couple other things. The first is, if you haven't liked the video yet, I ask you to hit that thumbs up button there. It just helps the video out as more and more eyes get to see it. If you haven't yet, drop a comment down there. Let us know you're here, whether you're on Facebook or on YouTube. Or if you are so inclined, hit that share button. You can start a watch party on your Facebook profile. You can share it through Facebook, or on YouTube, you can copy that link and text it out or email it out. Maybe to somebody who you know might really need this today. We just want you to be able to share your church with your friends, and we appreciate you doing that. If you're looking for ways to give to the church, 3 easy ways. One is old school. You can write a check and drop it in an envelope, mail it to the address that you see on the screen right now. Or if you'd rather do it digitally, there are 2 very easy ways to do that accomplish the exact same thing. You can go to our website, huddlediscovery.org/give. Or on your smartphone, you can download the Give Plus app. Either way, you can do a one-time gift, or you can set up a reoccurring offering if you'd like to do that there. And then lastly, if you have a need for prayer, celebration you'd like us to know about, or if you have a need in your life that you'd love your church to support you and encourage you and surround you in this time, we'd love to know about it. Please let us know by emailing us at prayers@huddlediscovery.org. For now, as we prepare to go, receive these words of blessing. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. And may the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen. Grace and peace, brothers and sisters. We'll see you next week.